Howdy folks, and welcome back to Train Valley 2! This time around we're taking a look at level 44, the Mountain of Garbage. I want to first start off by deleting this tunnel. This is because the tunnel and the rest of the valley will be completely submerged in garbage, so it would be better for us to go and actually salvage it for cash. From there we'll hook up the rightmost town to the port. We'll hook up the central town to the power station, and the town in the top left corner will be hooked up to the goods factory and lumber mill. Aside from the growing pile of garbage, the other curveball to look out for is the polymer facility, because it churns out trainloads of polymers at timed intervals. If this facility is not hooked up to the rest of the rail network properly, in a timely manner, the potential revenue source it offers will quickly turn into a liability in no time. For over a year I struggled with this level trying to get a decent time on it, but after all the building habits went away and I started anew, I found some new approaches that helps me streamline the process and get a new personal record. To be honest though, after fulfilling my starting strategy, the remainder of the level was a strategically improvised fluke. Like I had no idea what I was doing with this level, yet somehow it still all worked out. But I know you're here for more than just gameplay tips. You want to hear some vlog related updates, perhaps sprinkled with a few opinions or hot takes here and there, you know, to help spice things up. And I'm not exactly sure where to start. Perhaps a good place to start would probably be with my interpretation of this level. Now it shouldn't be surprising after producing all those consumer products in the previous level and all the associated carbon emissions that we managed to produce a lot of waste. Combine this with all the other industrial activities that we participated in all the previous levels, and it comes as no surprise then that the world of Train Valley 2 is in great ecological trouble. With its forests turned to deserts, its coastal lands submerged by rising sea levels, and its valleys filled with refuse. Now it's up to us to pick up all the pieces and build a better world for Train Valley 2. The remaining levels of Train Valley 2 will focus on these issues and others, but that's just my headcanon. With all of that out of the way, we can focus more on some vlog-related updates. I guess we'll start with my brother. The good news is that he no longer has shingles. And he also got interested in that game I mentioned previously, called Among Us. And it sounds like he's having a good time, so I'm happy with that too. I also got something for his birthday. I bought him 2 games for the price of 1 AAA title thanks to the Steam Store's Halloween sale. But now with all that out of the way, my brother plans on spending quality time with his friends down in Big Sur State Park, where they plan to go hiking. There's nothing wrong with that, but the pandemic isn't over, so the last thing I would want to do in his position is go out on vacation. Meanwhile, I spent the last week of October playing the Crown Tundra DLC for Pokemon Sword and Shield. After the Isle of Armor release, I wasn't expecting the Pokemon Company to do that much for the second portion of the DLC. But since the DLC is released back on October 23rd, I spent a decent amount of time trying to collect the legendaries from previous Pokemon generations I had missed out on growing up. It should probably go without saying that's probably the reason why a video didn't get published last week. I admit that and I'm sorry. But for a game as simple as Pokemon, I was not expecting some of the shenanigans that I stumbled into, namely catching the Galarian variants of Articuno. And it seems like a lot of other people had much easier experiences spotting Articuno for the first time after it fled the tree. Spoiler alert. But for some reason, I was the exception because I looked everywhere and still couldn't find it to save my life. At that point, I remembered some life advice about how easy it is to find whatever you're looking for once you stop actively looking for it. And before I knew it, BAM! There it was right in front of my face. I wondered how inconvenient that struggle wound up, but then I shirked off the thought knowing Articuno didn't stand a chance against a Master Ball. Now, the Crown Tundra's Articuno is just sitting in a box somewhere collecting dust with the rest of the legendary Pokemon I caught. I did feel foolish on my quest to catch the legendary Reggie Pokemon, because the paper clues the game handed each player was an unhelpful mess, and there was no visible indication to suggest that the complete clues were inscribed on the doors of each Reggie's dungeon ruins. The quest for the 4 legendary Pokemon dubbed the Swords of Justice didn't go smoothly either, since it was a quest for footprints that didn't follow any rational linear pattern like real animal tracks would. And getting Keldeo, in particular, wasn't obvious either, and the preliminary guides on the subject of finding Keldeo were inconsistent, if not incomplete. In the end, there were simple puzzles whose execution made them unintuitive. I do have a few loose ends to tie with the Crown Tundra DLC heading into November, but aside from going back into ranked play or completing the National Pokédex through Pokemon Home, I suspect I'm mostly done with the game. Speaking of November, are you able to vote in America's 2020 election on November 3rd? If you are eligible and haven't voted today, please vote! And if you know anybody who is eligible to vote in America's 2020 election and has not yet, make sure they vote too. I hate to say this, but don't just vote for something stupid like Kanye West if he wound up in your state ballot. And don't vote for some vague third party like the Green Party or the Libertarians either, because they always lose. On another note, there are some people out there who like to split their ballot up by voting one major party into the White House and fighting for the other major party for the rest of the ballots. Doing that is a really bad idea in America's polarized political atmosphere, because the major parties don't cooperate with each other in a bipartisan manner under America's current political metagame. There is a reason for that, but that is a video topic for another day. With all that in mind, if you want 4 more years of Trump, you'll vote Republicans down the ballot. If you want something completely different, like Biden, you'll vote for Democrats down the ballot. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you expect me to say something overtly political, like suggesting which party to vote for in the 2020 election and why. There are a few reasons why I've hesitated to say anything on my channel up to this point, much to my chagrin. The first being that I don't want to isolate or demean my viewers in any capacity. Some people feel their political ideology is part of who they are, and when people question their political or worldviews, they perceive that as a personal attack. The second is a fear of retaliation, since I've heard horror stories of YouTube not promoting content just because it remotely talks about political or controversial topics. That's not to mention the threats of physical harm or death experienced by people that are more politically active. The last reason is that it's almost election day, and I know most people made up their minds 6 months ago. All things considered, my ballot goes toward the Democratic ticket as it always has. Though Bernie Sanders was my first choice in the Democratic primaries, Bernie bowed out of the race in April and endorsed Joe Biden, who later won the Democratic nomination in August, so Biden is getting my vote. Trump was never an option in my book. Several reasons explain why that is the case, but it would take too long to elaborate on, and I'm pretty sure nobody wants to hear it anymore. I completely understand if you disagree. Just remember there are over 200,000 people who succumbed to COVID-19 who would beg to disagree if they could. A casualty rate in no small part due to the Trump administration favoring an exclusively individualistic approach where municipalities and states were left to their own devices instead of a clear, cohesive, and collaborative response that integrated stakeholders at the municipal, state, national, and international level. Who knows what 4 more years of Trump would do in light of what happened in the previous 4 years. What I really hope for at the end of this election is not just a resolution to America's current crises, but the end of campaign ads asking for dang money. I've already donated and can't afford to move out, so why are they asking for even more money? Now for something less scary and a little spookier, because if my time management is good, this video will get posted on Halloween. I imagine everyone's Halloween plans this year are far less ambitious than they were in previous years, or just outright cancelled. Shoot, even when I went over to the hardware stores, their setups of Halloween decorations for sale were dramatically smaller than in previous years. But I'm getting off on a tangent here. The point I'm trying to get to is that this year, unfortunately, we aren't handing out any candy. A sentence I never thought would be uttered anytime soon, not just because of the pandemic, but also because the number of trick-or-treaters parading around our neighborhood dramatically declined over the last 10 years. I don't know where they all went, so maybe I'll finally ask around and find out what really happened. The one place I won't ask that question is Facebook. I tried to avoid using Facebook for any reason. In fact, it was only recently that I finally started posting links again to my content, and that was only out of sheer desperation to sustain or broaden my audience base. My avoidance was traditionally on principle, considering Facebook's endless list of user data fiascos. The worst and most noteworthy in recent memory being the Cambridge Analytica scandal. The simplest reason to avoid Facebook these days, however, is because the site is a cancerous mess for old people and conspiracy theories. It got so bad my mother quit looking at political posts. Not that anyone should look at those kinds of posts on Facebook to begin with, but her threshold for tolerating other people's nonsense is pretty high. She put up with me growing up with level 1 autism after all, or at least that's what the 5th edition of the Diagnostic Statistician's Manual calls it now. They used to call it Asperger's syndrome, if memory serves correctly, but that's not the rabbit hole I want to jump into. Back to Facebook. Not much I do online occurs there, but what I historically did there failed helping me out that much. If posts reminding me how much better my old classmates got their lives together wasn't unmotivating enough, For example, I get overrun with birthday reminders in my email I'd rather not put up with. I would unsubscribe from those sorts of emails, but I feel guilty for at least not remotely trying to remember people's birthdays. Either way, the last thing anyone wants is a reminder that they should get in touch online more with other people through guilt. This especially bothers me, since making authentic and original posts takes loads of emotional energy I lack. Energy which would be better served by actually chatting with someone I'm close to over the phone or in person instead. One particular instance on Facebook that stands out to me occurred in a personal message on my channel's Facebook page a few years back. I'd show the receipts, but Facebook changed its interface on everybody the other day, and now I don't know where everything is anymore. Long story short, I posted a video memento of my dog after it died, and someone left me a private message suggesting that I promote their pet care products, even though I made it clear at the end of the video that my dog was already dead. Roll credits. In all honesty, not everybody watches YouTube videos all the way, and it was pretty clear there was a language barrier between us, which didn't help the situation in any way, so I carefully extricated myself from the situation in the hopes of never hearing back. This seems to have worked out for everyone involved as far as I know, but I digress. At this point in the video, I'm not entirely sure what else to say because I've gotten quite a lot done over the course of the first few minutes of this video, and there's still a lot more runtime left that I need to get through. So I guess I can just go back and reflect on the level as a whole, because there are some tunnels here that I'm not quite familiar with that I think were kind of fairly novel at the time when I figured it out, either by researching online or just by stumbling across them on accident, like this tunnel. The only other challenges I have with this level is just making sure that I've managed all the steel properly and made sure that there was electricity available to power everything up. And there are some modifications and configurations I can do next time around that would probably optimize my personal record a little bit more, because every second shaved off counts. The biggest time sink in this level, though, for earning 5 stars, is the challenge behind the 4th star, which requires players to avoid upgrading their locomotives to the fastest model. But those are the remainder of my thoughts for this level. If there was anything else to mention, it might have something to do with time management. In the next week, I plan to change my work schedule. That way my hours are much easier to manage. And the other thing I needed to do was make sure that I got to bed a lot sooner, because I've been sleeping in too much and going to bed too late. So I'm hoping I get that fixed. Maybe I'll just wrap up the day just by washing up and going to bed as soon as I can. And then tomorrow I'll be able to go mow the lawn or something. Maybe finally work on the garden, because that needs some work done. I know my bonefish cactus, for example, is overhydrated due to the shape of its new pot, so I will have to replace it with a new setup that not only keeps the snails away and gets adequate sunlight, but also drains properly. On top of that, maybe I can spend some adequate time looking for bicycle gear, like a new helmet plus some new arm and leg pads. The most important part I need, though, for my bicycle are some new brake pads, since they are completely worn down. Maybe a new mouse pad would be nice too, since my current one is just a day planner. But I guess that's just the thing, my shopping list just never ends. There's always something else that needs to be taken care of. And that's not including some of the niceties that I was looking forward to. Like, I thought I was going to get a Lego set that was on sale on Amazon that was exclusively from Legoland, but the sale went away right from under my nose, so I was a little disappointed on that front. Better luck next time, I guess. But overall, I just wish that the want and the need to buy things would just stop, because I'd much rather earn more and save up for a rainy day instead. But sometimes things just break down, or they just don't cut it anymore, so I have to replace it with something else. Take for example the new game console setup I have in my bedroom. It took some effort and some time to put together, and then I realized that the power strip I hooked it up to just wasn't going to cut it. So I had to replace the power strip with a newer, more expensive one. Now it actually works as intended, so I don't need to change anything else as far as I can tell. Crossing my fingers, of course. The holy grail of things that need to be improved upon, though, is optimizing my video creation setup, because there needs to be some fine-tuning to make sure that the content I produce is the best quality. Like, for example, I had just made some executive decisions on what kind of program I was going to be using, and at first I thought DaVinci was going to be the way to go, but then I just kind of regressed back into working with Adobe Premiere Elements. I didn't make that decision lightly, But I do remember in a previous recording session that I don't think got published that I made a big stink about how I wasn't able to make an executive decision on what I was going to use to publish videos, and I've chosen to stick with Adobe Premiere Elements, not really by choice, but rather out of habit. But although I upgraded to the 2020 version, the Adobe Elements 2021 just came out like a week ago, and I was wondering why it hadn't come out any sooner, because I would have gotten that instead of just getting the 2020 version. So now if I want the latest version, I basically have to buy it twice in 1 year. The other issue, of course, is sound, because I always have trouble making sure the audio quality is at least half decent. It doesn't sound as professional as I would want it to at this point, considering the competition that's already out there. Like, I remember seeing this stupid footage of this dude whose setup was so on point that the noise cancellation of his setup was able to counteract the obnoxious loud banging of a rubber mallet on top of a computer desk. And did I mention that noise cancellation was done in real time? So I don't know how I'm going to be able to compete with that kind of setup, in all honesty. And I know what you're thinking, that this kind of stuff is all software related, and you're right. And that's kind of the problem, because I don't work with audio software as well as I could. Like, learning new software is just not my thing. It's a lot like learning a new language. It's supposed to be fun, but for me it just causes a lot of frustration and anxiety. So, I'm not sure what else to say. Like, I've talked about quite a few things already, and I don't think there's really much else for me to say. At least nothing that isn't too personal, really. And I'll spare you the details of that. So I think the only thing we need to do at this point in this level is to just get the steel slabs over to the town in the top left corner. And I think that should just about do it. So yeah, that's my personal record in real time, so that's pretty much it. So thank you all for watching, I will see you in the next video, and until then, take care, stay awesome, stay true to yourself, and remember to never give up. Bye everybody!